speak clearly into the microphones because it's being streamed on YouTube, all right? We'll do some introductions in a moment so you know who everybody is. In the meantime, a couple of formalities to go through before we get to that part. Is that okay? So, first we need an election of chairman.
Propose.
Yep.
So, thank you very much. Yeah, we've got that one. Right, firstly then, are there any apologies, please? Oh, sorry.
Thank you. We've received no apologies for absence, Chair.
Thank you very much. And members, do you have any declarations of interest?
No.
No, thank you. Right, first we're going to do some introductions so we know who we all are. My name is Derek Beer. I'm chairman of Dorset's Licensing Committee, and on my right...
Good morning, I'm Councillor Jill Haynes. I represent the Chalk Valleys.
And I'm Councillor Jack Jeans. I represent Shaftesbury.
We'll go to legal services.
Good morning, I'm Lara Autry from Legal Services.
Megan Rochester, Democratic Services.
John Miles, Democratic Services.
And the licensing team.
I'm Catherine Miller, Senior Licensing Officer and Report Author.
My name is Aileen Powell and I'm the licensing team leader.
Thank you. Now we go to the applicant, if we may.
Good morning, Gareth Gosling. I'm the Sergeant for the Drug and Alcohol Harm Reduction Team for Dorset Police. And I'm joined today by Kirsty Gatehouse, the Licensing Officer for Weymouth and Portland.
Now we go to the licence holder.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Tim Munro, representing Mr. Uden.
I'm Tom Stedman, assisting Tim Munro in helping Jamal Hoodin with this case.
Good morning. My name is Jamal Hoodin from Weymouth Tandoori.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Now, how this will go, firstly, the licensing team will outline why we're here and what the case is about. Then we'll go to the applicant and they will say, bring forward what their concerns. And then we go across to you for your response to say how you feel about things. Now, we must give everyone, no one will interrupt anybody else at any time. So if someone's speaking, wait till they finish to come to me whether you agree with it, disagree with it or not. We've got to keep it well and truly in order. So everyone will have a fair time to speak and there'll be plenty of time to ask questions or whatever. And at the end, we'll retire and consider everything we've heard and then come up with our decision, which will be notified to you hopefully within 5 working days. Do you understand the process? Okay, everyone happy? Thank you very much. So in that case, I'll ask the licensing team to outline the case, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a hearing to consider a review application for Weymouth Tandoori premises licence bought by Dorset Police. The review has been made under the licensing objective of the prevention of crime and disorder on the grounds that there is evidence that the premises are associated with employing illegal workers contrary to the immigration legislation. And this was following an enforcement visit made by the immigration officers on the 24th of September 2024. In consultation with partners for His Majesty's Immigration, Compliance and Enforcement Team, Dorset Police no longer have confidence in the designated premises supervisor or the licence holder to uphold the licensing objectives. The application can be found at Appendix 1. The application was also supported by a statement from an immigration officer who attended the premises on the above date. However, as his statement contains sensitive information, it cannot be shared in the public domain, but I can confirm that both members, the applicant's agent and the police have received a copy. The current licence allows for the sales of alcohol on the premises, and that's Monday to Saturday from 10 a.m. till midnight, Sunday, Christmas Day and Good Friday, midday to 2300 hours. And then on New Year's Eve, it's from the end of permitted hours on a New Year's Eve to the start of permitted hours on the following day, or if not permitted hours on the following day, midnight on the 31st of December. The licence also allows for late night refreshment indoors, and this again is Monday to Saturday, and that's 2300 to midnight, Sunday, Christmas Day and Good Friday, 2300 hours to 23:30. Sunday, Christmas Day and Good Friday, 2300 to 23:30. And New Year's Eve from the end of permitted hours on New Year's Eve to the start of permitted hours on the following day, or if not permitted hours, following a day midnight on the 31st. And there's a copy of the current licence, which is at Appendix 2. The applicant for the licence holder has written to the police to commence mediation. The correspondence between the two parties is attached at Appendix 3. And since the report was written, there were further exchanges of emails between these parties. This has been submitted as supplemental information, and this has been circulated to members, the interested parties, and published on the Dorset Council website. A representation in support of the review has been received from the Home Office Immigration. However, their comments contain some sensitive information and again cannot be published in the public domain. But members have received a copy of this statement together with the Dorset Police and the licence holder's agent. There were no other representations received from any responsible authorities. The Town Council for Dorset Council and Weymouth Town Council has written in support of the review, and their comments are attached at Appendix 4. And the ward member for Melcombe Regis has also made comments, and his can be found at Appendix 5. Where the licensing authority considers that action under its statutory powers is appropriate, it may take the following steps. Modify the conditions of the premises licence, which includes adding any new conditions or any alteration or omission of existing condition, for example, by reducing the hours of opening or by requiring door supervisors at particular times. Exclude a licensable activity from the scope of licence, remove the designated premises supervisor, for example, because they consider the problems are a result of poor management, suspend the licence for a period not exceeding 3 months, or revoke the licence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, are you happy with that? Yeah. Happy with that, Gareth? Yeah. Are you happy with... I won't ask you to... Sorry, can you...
You just say there's a representation from Weymouth Town Council. Councillor, right, Mr. Furman and John O'Rourke. Okay, no, thanks.
You will have ample opportunity to state anything you need when we've gone through each process, but it's right, you can ask a question on anything, and that's okay. Thank you very much. Members, no questions, no? Right, we go to the applicant. Gareth, would you like to? Yeah, did anybody else have questions? No? No, thank you.
Good morning. I don't intend to speak a great deal this morning. We've tried to include as much of the information in a written form for your consideration in advance of the hearing today. What I would like to add is that it's really recognised by Dorset Police that licensed premises are intended to provide excellent social and economic value to the communities in which they serve. Where we can identify that the licensing objectives have been undermined and in such a way that is actually identified within the guidance as being significant, it's important that we take every action that is necessary to deal with that. The guidance does state that revocation of the licence should be considered even in the first instance, and that should hopefully guide members to understand the severity of what's happened at this particular premises. We have engaged in mediation to try and identify possible routes that we might be able to agree in advance of today's hearing, but unfortunately we haven't had any progress on that we can bring to you an agreed position other than that has been stated originally in our application. We're grateful for the support that the immigration team have provided with regards to the evidence, and the position is that as it stands we don't have confidence that the licensing objectives will continue to be upheld should the licence remain. We are happy to take questions as required, but at that stage, you've had all of the information that we have in a written form. But any questions, quite happy to answer for you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. And I can confirm that members have read all of the reports. Members, do you have any questions for Sergeant Gosling?
Not for me, thank you.
No, thank you. Legal or licensing, do you have any questions?
No, thank you, Chair, no.
And do you have any questions on the report as it's given?
We have some questions. Morning, Sergeant Gosling. You mentioned we've entered into a mediation. I think the committee have a list of emails that were exchanged between myself and Sergeant Gosling. We offered up several thoughts and ideas of how best we should remedy the issues highlighted by the Immigration Authority. Unfortunately, there was nothing coming back from the other side. So it didn't really feel like mediation. It felt like me sending lots of letters and just being told there's no way forward other than revocation. But I would like to ask Sergeant Gosling, have you considered any other remedy apart from revocation?
You happy to respond to that?
Yeah. With regards to the route, I mean, we conduct a variety of different reviews and various applications all the time throughout the Dorset area, Dorset Council and BCP area. Engaging in mediation is one of those processes that's really important that it's led by the licence holder, because we're really keen that it's not something that's necessarily imposed on a licence holder, but they are things for us to consider. And unfortunately, whilst we're grateful for some of the measures that have been put in place, given the history of this particular premises that's highlighted in the documents provided by the immigration team, the concerns that we have are that they don't go far enough, and that unfortunately the only available outcome is revocation in our view.
Thank you very much.
Again for Sergeant Gosling, do you agree that the stepped approach, which is highlighted several times within the 182 guidance, hasn't been implemented at all in this process?
That's your opinion.
The stepped approach is something that we've actually taken on as a team, and I would say that we've enhanced it. So any premises that come to our attention where we believe that the licensing objectives have been undermined in any way, we do take, as Mr. Munro stated, a stepped approach, and we've developed a 5-step approach to make it quite formal within how we work. So, for example, if there was a problem at the premises, we might visit them, even give them a phone call in the first instance, aim to work with them, potentially bring in our partners as well. And there would be a lot of communication that would take place to try and avoid a review taking place. Unfortunately, with regards to this type of matter, as you'll see from the 182 guidance referred to by Mr. Munro, there is a reference to immigration offences being considered particularly seriously, and that it is advised within that guidance that action must be taken and a review is encouraged, and that even revocation in the first instance is appropriate. So that's why we find ourselves here.
Thank you. Do you have another point to raise?
Could you explain to us how revocation rather than conditions will resolve the issues highlighted in the report from the Immigration Authority?
Applying conditions to a licence is generally to ensure that there are certain procedures in place that ensure that, and they have to be relevant. If they're annexed to conditions, they're relevant to that particular premises. So I'm trying to think of examples that might be appropriate, but if Perhaps, for example, if you're running a late night nightclub, it might be a required condition that you disperse people from the area because of residential properties nearby or something similar to that. When it comes to conditions around preventing crime, and in particular crime that all licensees should be aware is a crime and should not take place within a licensed premises. If I was to condition to not conduct a crime or be involved in a crime, I'd have to apply that to every single license. There are certain things that are unwritten, and therefore we expect every licensee to uphold. And one of those things is to ensure that immigration offences are not connected with a licensed premises. So we don't routinely condition people to ensure that immigration offences don't take place. It is assumed that they will do that.
Thank you.
Guidance does suggest. Sorry, Sergeant Gosling, do you agree that the 182 guidance does suggest that conditions are appropriate, both in the granting of a licence and in the review process regarding immigration offences?
They can be.
Oh, sorry.
Of course. It is, of course, for members today to decide the different opportunities for outcome here. It is for us as the, if you like, the experts in crime disorder to put forward our case, and the options, the available determinations for you are those that were outlined by Catherine earlier. Whatever you feel is appropriate, given the information that you have available to you, that is the route that you should take, of course.
As Sergeant Coles has explained, we bear in mind everything we've heard from all parties, and then we make a decision later on the appropriate actions, and that's where we'll go from there. Yeah. Just wait one moment. I'm still switching.
May? Thank you very much. Has Mr. Uden or the Weymouth Tandoori ever given you calls to query their ability to manage the premises within the licensing objectives?
I think Sergeant Gosling has outlined that quite well in his presentation, but if you'd like him to reiterate what he said, then fine.
We've tried to be as clear as we can in our written submission. Everything that you have regarding that premises has been included within the paperwork. There is nothing else.
Thank you. And do you have any other questions? We won't ask you to put your case yet. Yeah, okay.
Have you ever met Mr. Uden? Sorry, Sergeant Gosling, yeah. Have you ever met the licensee, Mr. Uden, in the time that he's been at Weymouth Tandoori? He's been there since 1987. Has the licensing authority ever engaged with him?
I don't know if the licensing authority have ever engaged with him. That's maybe a question for them.
Would you like to respond to that?
As far, no, as far as I'm aware, we haven't either.
Can I just rephrase that? Or the police? Have you ever met Mr. Uden yourself, Sergeant Gosling, as the licensing sergeant for the town?
I think Sergeant Gosling said he's been in touch by phone and such like, but what would you?
I'm quite happy to respond, Chair. So, as the licensing sergeant covering the whole of the Dorset County area, so not just the Dorset Council area, I have, at last count, about 4,500 licensed premises. Yeah, so unfortunately, despite my best wishes, I can't meet everybody, and I haven't met Mr. Uden before.
And everything that's in front of us today is what you've put forward, what they've put forward, the licensing team, and we'll weigh up all of those things. Yeah, so, but your question is a reasonable question. Thank you. Do you have one more question?
No, I have no more questions.
Members, do you have any more questions now for Sergeant Gosling based on what you've heard?
No, thank you.
Has anybody else any questions? No? Thank you, Lice. No? Nobody else any questions? In that case, I'll ask you to present to us how you feel you're still a fit and proper person to hold the licence. Thank you very much indeed. And
Thank you, Chairman. I need to put some background, I think, some colour to the application. You've already heard that the police haven't engaged in mediation. You've already heard that the police have not had any dealings with Mr. Uden, and Sergeant Gosling has never met Mr. Uden. However, we've got a review, and the review is based on a report sent to the police from the Immigration Authority following a visit on the 24th of September this year. It's interesting that the Home Office, who are a responsible authority, haven't called for the review themselves. But I think if you investigated a little bit further and looked at the general regulations for the Home Office for calling a review, it doesn't anywhere near hit their criteria. So it would be unlikely that the Home Office, and it is likely because it hasn't happened, would have called a review. So it's left to the local police to react to that report. Now, that report is the sum and the whole of the evidence. There's nothing in the review from the police that adds to that report. In fact, there's no representation from the police other than saying we are submitting this report and this proves something that undermines the licensing objectives. Therefore, we want this licence reviewed. Further, we want it revoked. Now, if this offence is so serious, why hasn't there been any kind of communication between the police or the Immigration Authority, and both their guidance and the 182 guidance suggests there should be, to go and interview Mr. Uden, to investigate the alleged breaches? There has been a referral for a civil fine. That referral takes a whole process. The next process, by the way, this was issued on the 24th of September. The next process is for the Home Office to issue a report to Mr. Uden and invite him to fill in and explain why there was a breach. That hasn't happened yet. So from the 24th of September till now, which is about 3 months, nothing has happened. So it may be that it's unlikely that there will even be a civil penalty. Now, the matter of criminality or innocence of guilt is not a matter for this bench. That's for other people to decide. This bench will decide that there's been a problem caused, an undermining of the licence objectives, and how are you going to remedy it? The police see no remedy at all. The police see closure as a remedy. Well, let me explain. Mr. Uden's restaurant is a restaurant, and it sells alcohol. By shutting it, by stopping selling alcohol, does not shut the restaurant, and the problem of employing illegal staff doesn't go away. All that happens is that the licensing regime relinquishes any kind of authority or responsibility on that premises. So I don't see that revocation is a remedy. The remedy would lie in the conditions and Mr. Uden adhering to those imposed conditions. That's what we say. All right. Mr. Uden has reflected on his poor administration that's led to the breach of the Home Office regulations. He hasn't committed a crime. There is no crime. The crime was committed by the two migrants being employed. That's the criminal offence. Mr. Uden's breach of regulations was by poor administration and is not a criminal offence. Mr. Uden has run the Weymouth Tandoori since 1987 and never attracted the attention by poor management, by way of poor management, in any way at all of the police or the local authority. During that time, the business has undergone some changes. Mr. Uden has variously run the business with his brother and his brother and his cousins. And what's happened is that since 2016, when the business did attract the attention of the Immigration Authority at the time and was issued with a civil penalty for the employment of an individual illegally, the business was being run, the leasehold is Mr. Uden, but the business was being run by his brother, They then solicited the support of the accountants at the time, and they underwent all the statutory checks that were needed for employment on the behalf of Mr. Uden's brother. In 2023, Mr. Uden's brother left the business. Mr. Uden himself then has taken over the business. He has a new accountant, J&C Accountants of Basingstoke, and he was under the impression they were going to give him the same service as the previous accountants had, and that was to do all the checks. Clearly, the fine at the time focused everybody's attention. Mr. Uden was very much aware of his requirements under the Licensing Act, indeed the Immigration Act, to comply and make sure nobody was illegally employed. He found out that in October 2023 that the accountants were not doing that on his behalf, so he undertook that job himself. Now, the business has declined somewhat after COVID and during this fuel crisis, etc. And Mr. Uden only employs 4 staff, and his turnover is very low. So it didn't seem an onerous task at the time. So that's what he did. So the 2 people involved, one is called Mr. Shippu. That's a gentleman who's in breach, and it's in the report as the immigrant who had the right to work, but not for Mr. Uden. And Mr. Uden checked Mr. Sidhu. He took a photograph of his biometric card, which we have a copy of, and his accountant put him on a payroll. So he's a paid employee.
It would be useful if we didn't refer to names at this time as it's live streamed. If we didn't refer to individuals by name, just call them Annie. So just if you're referring to an individual, say, and the individual who worked at that time. Yeah, okay.
The accusation that Mr. Uden took no, or made no attempts at all to ensure the legality of Mr. S is not right. What happened was Mr. Uden got it wrong. And in fact, what happens is, with somebody who has a sponsor and is nominated as a skilled worker, as his biometric data says, which Mr. Uden took a copy of, which we have here. He says he's a skilled worker and he has leave to entry. A skilled worker can work for other employers for up to 20 hours a week, and that's not a problem. The problem is, though, and unbeknown to Mr. Uden, is that it has to be in the same profession that the grant was originally given. And in this case, Mr. S's original grant was as a care worker. But it didn't stop there. Mr. Uden did look up, because there's a list of categories of people that are deemed as skilled workers, and in there are chefs and cooks. So again, erroneously, he's got his biometric card, he's seen he's a skilled worker and permitted to work, he checks the skilled workers list and finds a chef or cook, and makes a decision that that verifies his right to work in this country. Now, that's not blatant, that's not willful, that's not a criminal offence. Why would you go to that effort? Right? That's a man who's got the administration wrong. Right? And a man that gets administration wrong, having gone through a process, is not a man that deserves to have his licence revoked without any kind of intervention. The representative from the Immigration Authority suggests that, and it's probably the case on some occasions, that there's a negative impact by employing illegal workers to the society and to the community. And that's loss of revenue to the HMRC through lack of tax being paid and national insurance. Not in this case. I have the wage slips for Mr. S and his national insurance number, and he was processed like any other person. So we have the case here with Mr. S, that the checks have been made, albeit at the back end not quite correct, and he's been put on the payroll. There's no attempt to deceive or defraud. There's no attempt to exploit the worker. His hourly pay was £12.07 above the minimum rate. There was no attempt to exploit. There's a suggestion in the immigration officer's report that people are exploited by giving them unsatisfactory accommodation. Their wages are below the average, and therefore gain a trading advantage over other businesses. None of that happened in this case. The cause for the visit from the immigration authority was on the basis of intelligence, and that intelligence said that there were people working for Mr. Uden 6 hours a week, full hours a day, for £15 a week. The investigation established that didn't happen, unequivocally wasn't going on. Right? There was no question of exploitation or slavery. That was the intention of the visit from intelligence that the Immigration Service had received. So we know that that didn't happen, but they did uncover Mr. S's problems with his right to work. The second person that was there was Mr. R. And the report from the immigration is very clear. There's an interview. It's uncautioned, we don't know, but we're going to rely on it for the sake of this. And this is the evidence that Mr. Sergeant Gosling was relying on for his review, that he'd been there for a couple of days, Saturday, Sunday, and the day of the event. It's not in dispute. Nobody said he was there longer or shorter. He was there for 3 days. He said he was staying with a friend and helping Mr. Uden out. Nobody disputes that, not Sergeant Gosling, not the immigration people. They state it as one of the reasons that they're bringing forward this review. He was not paid, he just received some food. Now, again, that's not disputed by the immigration or by the police. Nobody's given any other evidence that this man was nothing else than somebody staying with a friend and offered out to help for some food. Now, you might think, well, okay, that's a concocted answer. But no, that's contained within the review, the report given to the police on which this review was called. But I put it to you, had that been a slightly different scenario, and the pub down the road, which had a landlord from Newcastle, had a customer who was on holiday from Newcastle in Weymouth for a couple of days, happened to say he had a personal licence, and the landlord happened to say, well, I'm a bit busy, will you help me out for a pie and a few beers? That would sound a very reasonable thing, and nobody would construe that that was working or in breach of any other kind of rules or regulations concerning wages or national insurance. And that's precisely what happened. So there's Mr. R. He's on holiday with his friend. They're eating in the restaurant. He comes from Bangladesh, the same as Mr. Uden. They had a conversation. He said that he'd been working somewhere else. Mr. Uden said, well, it's a bit busy. He's short-staffed. He said, well, I could help you out. And he said, okay, help me out. He ascertained he had a personal license. And that's important too, because the little role that Mr. R did undertake was behind the bar. And although the immigration authority did question Mr. R quite deeply on his knowledge of serving alcohol, it's quite clear he has a personal license. He has all the knowledge. Right? So what we've got then is somebody who's gone through the biometric checks, Mr. S, appears to Mr. Uden to be legal and proper, is gone through the payroll, treated like any other employee, no suspicion of exploitation, and a friend that's come in to help him. In fact, Mr. R was there when the immigration people came in, and he invited them in. There was no attempt by Mr. R, or indeed the other 4 people involved, to hide anything, cover anything up. They were honest, straightforward, and cooperated. Mr. Uden had been shopping. That's why Mr. R was helping him out behind the bar. And when he returned, he carried on. The Immigration Authority report is incomplete. I suspect you've seen that. There was 5 people, or 5 people that were interviewed that night. You only have the report from one interview. There's no collaborative evidence at all as to any misdoing by any of them that should cause any concern. The report also mentions some things about the licence that were apparently missing or at fault. And there's references to Challenge 25. There's a reference to not having a staff training log, and there's a reference to not having a refusals log. In fact, and perhaps the committee, the licensing authority would confirm it, Mr. Uden's licence for Weymouth Tandoori doesn't contain those conditions. There's no need for him to have Challenge 25 posters. It's not a requirement of his licence. There is a requirement on the licence to have an age verification scheme policy, which he had, but he wasn't asked for that. There was a presumption on behalf of the Immigration Authority that he should have these things, which are not on his licence. A check of his licence might have helped. There is no requirement on his licence, either mandatory or a voluntary condition, that he should have a staff training log. Probably desirable, but there is no condition. And there is no condition that he should have a refusals log. So those criticisms are unfounded. There's also another criticism in the log, in the review representation from the immigration enforcement, which is accompanied with some pictures. Now, this came to us on the 3rd of December, and it mentions some concerns. Well, none of those concerns have resulted in any kind of representation from another responsible authority. So they've either looked at this, they've been informed and decided that it's not the concerns that the Immigration Authority officer is worried about, or they have had it and failed to respond, or they haven't had the information. At the beginning of October, Mr. Uden, you'll hear from Mr. Stedman in a minute, who deals with his compliance issues, had his annual fire check done and completely clean, no problems at all. None of the issues that are apparently highlighted in this supportive representation given to us on the 3rd of December. There are 2 other representations here today, one from Councillor John Royal, which says that he has no issues on behalf of his residents, and one from Councillor Furman, who for some reason wants revocation and doesn't explain why. So that's really our position and the background to the events that have led to the review. And it's disappointing that, having had that review on the 24th of September, that nobody from the Immigration Authority or the police have visited to talk, to counsel, to investigate. And in both the guidances, the 182 for the police and the Home Office guidance, suggests there should be an interaction early on to stop any more breaches. In fact, the immigration guidance goes further. They're suggesting that there should be up to 3 breaches and interventions before they come to a review. The police take a different view. Obviously, they think one offence, one breach, and no intervention demands a revocation. Revocation will not solve the problem. The remedy is with you. The remedy is to put conditions in place, warn Mr. Uden of his behaviours, put those policies, those conditions into place, and have them enforced. Otherwise, you just allow Mr. Uden, potentially, to go away and continue with no overarching control. That's it, really. Oh.
Thank you very much indeed. Before I come to questions for anybody, I'll just ask your colleagues if they'd like to add anything to your presentation.
So I was a police officer with Dorset Police between 23 and 2012. So I've also been a friend of Jamal's for probably 15 or 20 years. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say Jamal is the best bookkeeper. Yeah, some of his, the way he's run his business has not been ideal at times. So I have taken it upon myself since this visit from the immigration to help Jamal. So I have created for Jamal all the things that the licence needs. We've got an alcohol log, we've got the staff files, which includes all the biometric checks. We've got staff HR policies, we've got risk assessments, fire safety, first aid. We have a staff meeting every week since this incident happened, okay? I don't see what a revocation would achieve, whereas if you give Jamal conditions, you know, send a council officer, send the police once a week, check on him. He has got this folder which has got every member of staff in. It's got the biometric home office checks, okay? There will be no more mistakes. Jamal has made a mistake in this instance. There's no disputing that. We're not disputing that. He's never been in trouble with the police before. That's not Jamal's character, but I'm taking it upon myself to help Jamal. He needs a little bit of help. He doesn't need his licence taken away. That doesn't achieve anything. Give him conditions. He will comply with every condition. Yeah, visit him weekly, visit him monthly. He now has got every bit of documentation he needs to successfully and lawfully run his business. So if I could just ask you to reassure you that give him conditions and they will all be met. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamal. Is there anything you'd like to say at this time?
No.
It's going to be slightly harder. Jamal will have to speak quietly. He's got good English, but it can be slightly broken. So.
Yeah, I'm happy with the condition. Any condition you can put us.
He effectively, he'd like to have conditions.
Yeah.
He's aware of what's happened. He's aware he was in the wrong. No one's going to dispute that in this room. We're not saying he was right. We know he was wrong, but the conditions, if they're given to him, he will comply. There is no doubt. There's no turning back. This is his chance, and you're aware of that, aren't you?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go for wider questions, I'll ask my colleagues if they have any questions for you.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I don't mind which of the three of you answer. I'd like to just drill a bit more into the setup of the business, because you talked a little about having a brother and then some cousins. Is this now a sole trader business? Are there any other businesses that you run or own, or is this just the only one that you have? Could you just explain to us a bit more about the business?
Okay. So since 1987, Mr. Uden has the lease of the business, and variously he's run it in conjunction with other family members. That finished altogether on the 14th of August 1923, and Mr. Uden not only has the lease, but he runs the business himself. Between 2016 and 2023, his brother ran the business, and previous to that, his cousins. And Mr. Uden has been a director, because he's a leaseholder, all the way through. So Mr. Uden is in charge day to day, manages the premises as the DPS. And it's a limited company. So that's where we are, really. Is that okay?
Jack, have you got any questions?
All my questions have been answered by both parties already, actually. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. No more from you? No. At this time? At this time. Okay, thank you. Sergeant Gosling, you cropped up a couple of times. Was there anything you'd like to ask the applicant, the licence holder at this point?
Yeah, I just think for perhaps the benefit of the members of the subcommittee, there's been some mention in particular at the latter part of that submission around conditions that are invited, and it would be great. I'd be grateful and perhaps useful to the members of the subcommittee if any ideas as to what conditions might be appropriate could be suggested or proposed by the licence holder, just so that you're crystal clear on what it is that could be conditioned to prevent this from happening again.
Thank you. Did you have thoughts on conditions? Yeah, thank you.
I presented some to Sergeant Gosling early on in our exchange of emails, which I think that Sergeant Gosling said at the time that he would comment on, should you be minded that conditions were the route forward. I've got, and in fact, Sergeant Gosling very kindly at the time tidied them up, as it were, to put them into some sort of unambiguous state that could be agreed by us all. The proposed conditions would be that there would be a policy, a written policy for training and auditing matters relating to immigration. So, as I said, Mr. Uden only employs 4 people, perhaps in peak of season 5, and not all of those require checks for immigration. So it's not a huge task, but it's a task that has to be efficiently undertaken and not left to anybody else. And that to be managed by an external contractor. So it would be taken out of Mr. Uden's hands. He'd be responsible, but the external contractor would have a skill and knowledge and the ability to undertake those checks regularly and accurately. And the employee documents, all of them, and photographs would be available on the premises at all times for inspection by the licensing authority or the responsible authorities. So at any time that the police, the immigration authority, that the licensing authority officer could go to the premises and say, look, where is your employee form? He'd be able to look at the form. He'd be able to identify the people with their photographs and the evidence they'd use to prove their right to work. And there would be an opportunity, obviously, then to match up the people with the form. So there'd be a clear link with everybody in the building. And the external contractor, Mr. Stedman, would oversee employment of non-UK staff and maintain an oversight additionally. So any staff at all that were employed Mr. Stedman would be informed, he would do the appropriate checks, he would put the folder up to date. So there'd be no opportunity for Mr. Uden to fail again with poor administration, because we think that's the remedy to this. We think the cause was poor administration and not willful or blatant abuse of the immigration laws.
So from that point, Sergeant Gosling and his team have been in touch and did help you with that. I did get the impression from your earlier comments that there've been no... may I ask what you're doing? Yeah. Yeah, thank you. May I ask just what that is you're putting out? Is that your suggested conditions? Sure. What you're putting out there, may I ask what that is that you're putting out, please? Condition. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Would everybody like to look at that and just verify it's okay? You're happy with that? Lara, are you happy with this?
I've got a copy of it.
Oh. Maybe in a minute. We'll just, yeah. So just to continue, we'll disregard that for a moment. So in fact, did have some communication with the police prior to this review to
several, perhaps 10 or 12 email exchanges where we requested to meet, that was denied, and then could we mediate, and Sergeant Gosling said yes, of course, And then we exchanged emails. But I think the last email said we reached an impasse where Sergeant Gosling was wanting a revocation rather than conditions. And we clearly couldn't support revocation.
Like to ask any questions at this point? Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a comment, or rather than or possibly question. It's obviously been a challenge for Miss Adden to actually do the paperwork. And therefore, looks like Mr. Steadman is going to take over doing the paperwork. Our situation is that we have to trust our licence holders, right? We can't be popping round there once a week to check that they're doing it right, nor can the police. This is a matter of trust. So my question is, why isn't Mr. Steadman taking on that licence? Because Mr. Udden obviously has a problem dealing with the paperwork.
Well, sorry, yeah. I thought I'd cover that. Up until 2023, that paperwork could be done for Mr. Uden's brother by his accountant. It was only after Mr. Uden's brother ceased having anything to do with it and they changed accountants. Mr. Uden initially thought his accountant was going to do it, but then found out he wasn't. But it was only sort of one application, really, and he thought he got it right. The trust is the most important thing, really, but the licensing regime is a collaborative operation between all the responsible authorities and the licensees. It's not the cops and the robbers. So they should all be working together within the licensing regime to achieve the objectives and upholding the license objectives. It's not just the licensee working alone. It's a collaborative effort. So trust is the thing. So just to ask you a question, if you've lost trust, lost faith in Mr. Uden altogether, and you revoke his license today, how does that resolve the issue that's been brought to you today? It doesn't. Nothing has happened. He would, if he was minded to, and I'm sure he's not, just carry on employing illegal people in the way he's done now. And there is no regime that he will be held accountable to. This way, Mr. Uden is accountable and still accountable to the responsible authorities and this committee.
Just before my colleague comes back, I'll just put straight the record on this evidence that you put forward. We'll adjourn to consider this in a minute. And in the meantime, we'll deal with the questions in hand. Okay, thank you, Joe.
Yeah, I think my response to what you've just said to me is that we are here only to deal with alcohol licence. That is our sole purpose. And therefore, if we were to decide to revoke the licence because we have no trust in what is happening with the licence holder, then it is purely the alcohol licence side of things that is for us to deal with. Any other matters, that is to deal with the police and the immigration. And so I'm afraid we do have to separate them. It's not a question that we are looking at it in the round, because that's not our job.
Yeah. Yes, Madam. Sorry. I fully understand your point, and Mr. Uden does too. But unfortunately, what happens is the two things are separate, because there is no question about Mr. Uden's ability over 37 years to manage the alcohol licensing and to serve alcohol properly. The issue is about employing an illegal worker, and that's the purpose of the review. How do we stop the employment of an illegal worker at Weymouth Tandoori? And that's what the review is for. It's not here for punishment. It's here for a remedy. That's what 182 asks you to do, to resolve the review being brought.
Obviously, Sergeant Gosling doesn't agree. Can he explain what doesn't he agree with, just so we can understand? He's shaking his head just so we can understand it.
I think it's, as my colleague has said, we'll come to Sergeant Gosling. We have to be mindful that the licence holder is a fit and proper person to run the business properly. That's That's our responsibility, that's your responsibility, that's where it goes. And we have, as my colleague has said, we have to be content that the licence holder is a fit and proper person to hold the alcohol licence. But you asked the question of Sergeant Cosling. I'll ask if he's prepared to answer.
I couldn't put it better myself, Chair. This isn't about trying to understand a remedy to the issue of employing illegal workers. Having a premises licence is a privilege. It's a privilege that comes with responsibilities, and we cannot simply condition everything. If we were to condition absolutely every possibility of wrongdoing, every licence would be huge. And there are certain things that every licence holder should understand. And exactly as you put, Chair, just to answer what it is that has been put to me as to what I was not content with, was around the issue of it is about determining whether or not the licence holder is a fit and proper person. This isn't about how fit and proper the team are around them. This is fundamentally the licence holder is the person responsible for this licence. It is a privilege to hold that licence, and they must do so. You have the opportunity to change the DPS. You do not have within your gift the opportunity to change or remove the licence holder. That's the equivalent of revocation.
Would you like to respond to that?
There is no test for fit and properness. That went out with the 1964 Act in 2003. There is no test for fit and properness. Right? It's much more objective than that. You do have a remedy. You could ask us to replace the DPS if you have no faith in the licence holder. So that remedy is there for you. That's not been suggested. The police said that they didn't think there would be any benefit in changing the DPS. It's the behaviours they need to change. But that remedy is there for you. So if you've lost the trust in the licensee, we can change the DPS.
Jack, have you got anything else to come back?
No, thank you.
Sure. Licensing team, have you got any questions or comments on that we've heard?
Just a couple of things. The DPS is Mr. Udin, and he's a licence holder, so it's the same person. And also, Mr. Munro referred to Mr. R having a personal licence. Do you know who it was issued from? Which council?
Did you hear that? Could you say who Mr. R's licence was issued from? No. Sorry.
I believe they've informed the licensing authority to whom granted it that he's no longer has a right to work. And it asked, I think it's in the report, isn't it? In the initial report. I think Sergeant Gosling might confirm that. Sorry. Sorry. With regard to the issuing authority for the licensing, for the personal license for Mr. R, I think there's a note in the original witness statement from the Immigration Authority saying that they've informed that authority that Mr. R doesn't have a right to work. As to what actions have been taken since, I don't know.
Are you content with that response?
I need to check the other statement to find out what it says, but yeah.
So, sorry, can you just confirm Mr. Udin is the licence holder, not the DPS? He's both. Okay. Okay.
Any more questions from yourselves?
Are there any other DPSs on the premises or not? It's just Mr. Udin. Right. Okay. Thank you.
Did you understand the question? Sorry, I'd like to say it again.
Sorry, is Mr. Udin the only DPS on the premises, or are there others?
You can only have one DPS on the premises. You can have as many personal licence holders, but only one DPS. That applies to all premises.
Do you have any more questions for? Oh, sorry. Thank you. Do you have any further questions on the presentation?
No, Chair. Not specific to the facts of the matter. The one thing I would ask for clarity on is whether or not, perhaps I missed it, there's been lots of information that's been provided by Mr. Munro, in particular around the nature of people's work, information that wasn't contained within the immigration paperwork, and reference to pay slips, etc. Could we get confirmation whether or not that's been submitted to this committee in advance of the hearing?
I can't answer that accurately. Would you be able to?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
I just had a question as to what's been submitted to the licensing authority by Mr. Rudin or Mr. Munro in written form, other than the emails in advance of the hearing.
I've only had the emails that was in the bundle that everybody's had, and the plus the supplemental that was received between the emails between both parties.
Yeah, the question probably relates to exclude that which we shouldn't have reference to regarding to pay slips and so on. Yeah, that you haven't had anything like that, no?
We've had nothing, no. We've just had the supporting documents from immigration.
Sorry.
The reason for that question, Chair, is that in the interest of ensuring that you've got the opportunity to consider everything in your determinations, I don't need to see them. And I'm happy to go on record to say that despite the fact that we have effectively received it during the hearing, or it's been referred to during the hearing, I have no objection whatsoever on the part of Dorset Police to the information and any support and documentation to support what it is Mr. Munro has said as being included in today's hearing and for you to consider.
Sorry, are you saying that did you want to have sight of the pay slips and stuff? Is that...
I don't feel that at this time I think we'd like to have an adjournment, if everyone would agree, to look at these things to see if they're relevant and worthy of consideration, and also just some clarity on the items that Sergeant Gosling has raised. So I'd like to adjourn for 5 or 10 minutes to go over these points, just so that we're all singing from the same hymn sheet, if that's okay. Is everybody happy to have an adjournment? Yeah. In that case, we'll adjourn for 10 minutes. Thank you. We'll now reconvene. Sorry. Just check we're on. Yeah. Okay. We will reconvene. We've looked at that which you submitted. We won't make any comment on that at this time. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we come to any more questions now? We won't be taking any new paperwork or anything else. Everything that was submitted was considered properly by all the interested parties, by ourselves, etc. So we won't take any new. We'll work on the information we have.
Parties are able to elaborate on the original submissions. So anything that we've given you today is an elaboration on that, not new material.
No, we'll just go round to, is there any more questions on your, we'll go back to summing up in a minute. Has anybody got any further questions now for the licence holder, please? Anyone here? No? No? Team, legal? No, right. So now we'll sum up in reverse order. This is your chance, as you're fully aware, to your last chance to make sure you've included everything, and then we'll go around the room. So back to you. Thank you.
Immigration Authority felt confident about bringing a review, which they haven't, the police have, and you wonder why. They would have to have looked at their own general regulations. And one of those things in their general regulations is there's no requirement for an immigration officer to attend these hearings, but according to their guidance it's generally good practice to do so. It's generally good practice to do so, to give informed decisions and ensure that sufficient weight is given to the evidence submitted. The Immigration Authority have decided not to do that today, and to leave, and just to give a 2-page report to the police, which contains one or part of an interview. The Immigration Authority would have asked the question, again in their guidance, do you believe it cannot be otherwise mitigated other than by revocation? And clearly, they think it can because they haven't brought the review forward. A review should be considered to encourage compliance. This is the Home Office guidance to the Immigration Authority. So that's what we're looking for, is the encouragement to comply. The ICE team, that's the immigration team, should advise if further offences take place within a 3-year period, it may have an effect on their licence. So the Immigration Authority are not looking at one offence. They're saying if more than one offence happens in a 3-year period, their threshold for bringing a review is much higher. If the risk of illegal working is deemed less serious, the caseworker will consider requesting conditions. So had the Immigration Authority been here, you would have expected that was one of the things they would have done, request conditions, given the seriousness of this particular employment. Mr. Ewden's conducted the business for 37 years in one form or another and never drawn the attention of the licensing authority under the old regime or the new regime as to his ability to manage the licensable activities. Mr. Ewden has employed a local company to assist him. He did use an accountant before, which stopped, so now he's looked for another replacement, and there were no incidents for years and years and years to manage those perceived issues. Mr. Ewden is busy now, working in his own restaurant, and administration to some people is a grind. But it's not he's not accepting that it shouldn't be done. He's not trying to avoid it. He's taken reasonable steps to ensure that it will be done and that compliance is foremost. We're putting it to the committee that the way to resolve, to remedy this clear breach, and it is a breach, Mr. Uden recognised it is a breach, that was arrived at through diligence, but not due diligence. He went through the process and he failed in the process. It's not as though he's blatantly and willfully tried to circumvent the Immigration Act. He's got his biometric card, he's checked it, he's looked at the guidance, misunderstood it. And we end up with an illegal worker exposed on a visit that was looking for an industrial scale immigration breaches. People working, apparently the intelligence said, people working for 6 days a week for £15 a week. No such case was found. We find we've got two, and they're not insignificant breaches, but in terms of immigration law and breaches, they're fairly minor breaches. It may not even incur a fine. It may incur a warning or no further action. There's clear guidance about the notices issued. So Mr. Uden is not the criminal. A fine, a civil fine, is not a criminal offence. The people that were employed committed the crime. You're not allowed to work. That's a criminal offence. So he did facilitate, by his negligence, the employment. There's no doubt about that. And what we're saying now is we recognise that, we can remedy that. That's all we have to say.
Is there anything you'd like to add to that? No, thank you. Mr. Uden, anything you'd like to add at this time? No. Members, do you have any questions on that? No questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Sergeant Gosling, would you like to sum up, please? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll try and be brief. I've only got a few notes. Just to put some clarity around what you've heard this morning, any authority can bring a review for any reason. There are certain authorities that lead on certain things. And but certainly when you're looking at the licensing objectives, the upholding of the crime and disorder objective is something that we in the police generally lead on, okay? And working with partners in this day and age where resources aren't as available as perhaps they might once have been. There has been the opportunity for any queries to be put to the immigration team by the licence holder, in so much as they could have contacted themselves. But I think largely we all understand that the information contained within the evidence provided by the immigration team is not in dispute. So what we've got today, and I think we really need to keep both aspects of what's been discussed today very clear and separate. We've got one with regards to the immigration matter that you've heard has got various criminal implications for people, and there are laws and regulations and requirements around immigration matters that are that is completely separate to this. What you're here today to understand is, or to determine, is whether or not the licensing objectives can, from now on, if you like, be consistently upheld. We've heard from Mr. Monroe that there isn't a fit and proper test, and there isn't, but you have to have confidence in the licence holder. That's what you have to have. There has now been more than one occasion where this type of incident has happened. And we've heard about, in Mr. Monroe's words, we've heard about negligence leading to this type of incident happening. We've heard how the licence holder needs a great deal of support to manage certain aspects of the business, and that's not uncommon, okay? But we do expect that certainly in with regards to issues where there is significant outcomes, so such as criminal or civil or various breaches of conditions, it's our expectation that the premises licence holder would be able to exercise the level of control and responsibility to uphold those conditions, those requirements, and fundamentally to promote the licensing objectives. what if the licence goes away? This is a restaurant, it's food-led, and of course there is the ability, as there is for a convenience store that wasn't able to sell alcohol, they could continue to sell groceries. And in the same regard, Mr. Udin can continue to offer food. Can we prevent within the licensing regime that from happening? No, we can't. Do we close the business? No, we can't within the licensing regime. But the opportunity for you today is to demonstrate that as somebody with the privilege of holding a license, a premises license, the expectation is to you to uphold the highest level of standards at all times and consistently, to ensure that if you are operating a license and you are delivering licensable activities, that you must at all times uphold the law and meet the requirements of the various agencies, including the immigration. And the guidance, the 182 guidance is particularly clear about that. And I would ask you to reflect on what it is, of the information that's been provided in a written form in advance of the hearing, where we've specifically highlighted elements of the 182 guidance that is appropriate and should be listened to in your determination today.
Thank you very much. I'll just ask my colleagues if they've got any questions on this, everything that Sergeant Gosling has said. Yeah, Jack, any question? No, thank you. We now go to the licensing team to see if they've got anything to say in summing up. Thank you.
No, I have nothing further to add. Thank you.
Laura, are you satisfied we've covered everything required of us?
Yes, Chair, I think you've covered everything.
Thank you. Are you, before we retire, are you happy that the proceedings have been fair and up to go? I thank you very much for being polite to each other and so on. You're happy that the proceedings have been conducted carefully? Right. Thank you, and fairly. We will now retire and consider everything that we've heard, everything that was written before, and we've listened to your comments and your remarks. We will, the authority will respond to you with a decision within 5 working days. And should you, any party, not just yourselves or the police or any party, not agree with that, then there is the right to appeal to Weymouth Magistrates Court within 21 days. So thank you for your attendance this morning. And have I covered everything, John? Oh, sorry, yeah, indeed, yeah. So were there any urgent items we need to cover at this time? No, thank you. Anything else? Yeah, and the exempt business? No, thank you. Thank you for that, John. So we'll retire. Thank you for your attendance.
Are you going to give your opinion today and the reasons later?
No, definitely not today. No, you'll get that within 5 working days with a decision and the reasons within 5 working days. Okay, are you content with that? Yeah, thank you very much. So thank you very much for your attendance this morning, and I hope the rest of the day is less challenging for you. Thank you.